Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a reclusive ex-U.S. Marshal builds a luxury sauna deep in the Wyoming woods, a delusional HOA decides it belongs to them. What follows is a battle of wills, forged documents, and midnight trespassing until one man fights back with the law, cameras, and quiet fury. I woke up the way I normally do on Sundays in Wyoming, slowly, peacefully, and with the vague awareness that if anyone dared bother me before sunrise, I'd probably haunt them after I died. My cabin was still dark, the air crisp from the night chill drifting in through a cracked window. I was dead asleep when my phone started vibrating on the nightstand, not ringing politely, vibrating like a damn power tool. I cracked an eye open and squinted at the screen. 5:46 in the morning. Unknown number. I let it buzz until it stopped. Whoever it was could wait until the sun had at least started its shift. It barely took 3 seconds before the phone started again. The same number, the same vibration that sounded like it was drilling directly into my skull. I grabbed it with the reflexes that 8 years in the Marshal Service had carved into my bones and put it to my ear without a single pleasant thought in mind. Hello? My voice was rough enough to sand wood. A cheerful female voice chirped back at me. "Good morning, Mr. Reeves. This is the Timberline Falls Homeowners Association. We're having our sunrise cleansing ceremony today. Could you open the gate to the sauna, please?" I hung up, not slammed the phone down in anger. No. I just calmly ended the call, rolled onto my back, and stared at the ceiling, wondering if I was Macy dreaming or if insanity had finally seeped through the pine trees and across the property line. My sauna, on my land, not in their HOA, not even on the same tax parcel. They might as well have asked if they could borrow my kidneys. 3 minutes later, the phone lit up again. A different number. I answered because curiosity kills more than cats. "This is Karen Shelby, president of Timberline Falls HOA. Mr. Reeves, ignoring HOA request is a violation of community regulations." I actually laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Lady, I don't belong to your HOA. That's incorrect. Our internal access map lists your recreational structure as a shared amenity. We require you to open the gate immediately." "I'm going to stop you right there," I said. "Whatever map you printed off Pinterest at 4 in the morning has nothing to do with me." "You are part of this community," she snapped, "and the community expects contribution." I hit the record button on my phone and set it on speaker. "So, you're demanding access to private property at 6 in the morning without my consent?" "It's not private if the community designated it otherwise." "Wrong," I said, already swinging my legs out of bed. "And if you show up at my gate, that's trespassing." A muffled voice behind her said something like, "We're already here." I froze for half a second, then walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. In the dawn light, the outline of 2 women in robes, actual robes, stood by my gate holding yoga mats and thermoses like they'd come to worship the holy steam of my $85,000 sauna. I tapped my phone again to switch to the intercom on the gate. My voice boomed through the speakers all the way to the gravel road. "Step away from the fence. You are trespassing on private property. Leave now." One of them actually had the nerve to wave at the camera and shout, "We're scheduled for cleansing. Karen said it's fine." I turned the siren mode on the intercom, an obnoxious, piercing tone designed to keep wildlife from messing with the trash bins. The women flinched, grabbed their mats, and hustled back toward the HOA walking path. The moment they were out of sight, I made my coffee, sat on the porch, and tried to figure out how the hell a homeowners association convinced itself that my private sauna, built with my own hands, paid for with my own money, standing inside my legally fenced acreage, belonged to them. By 8:30, as if to confirm they were out of their minds, a courier van pulled up. The driver handed me an envelope stamped with the Timberline Falls HOA logo. Inside was a printed letter titled Recreational Facility Access Schedule, with color-coded blocks indicating when different families would be utilizing the sauna amenity. It included a demand that I provide a spare key, a policy that my sauna must remain available for community harmony hours, and a note that failure to comply may result in corrective action. Corrective action. Cute. I stood there in my yard, sipped my coffee, and considered all the ways I could respond that would result in felony charges. Instead, I went inside, pulled out my original deed, the parcel maps, the contractor receipts, and the county registration for the structure. Everything legitimate. Everything ironclad. The HOA had lost its mind, but I wasn't losing sleep. I wrote an email to the county assessor requesting updated boundary documentation, attached copies of everything I had, and left my phone on the table. Around noon, another message pinged from the same HOA number. Uncooperative behavior noted. Please be advised the community will revisit this issue. Good. I hoped they revisited it with a competent therapist. I walked out to the sauna, checked the fence integrity, tightened the latch on the electronic lock, and then bolted the auxiliary bar across the gate. If they thought a sunrise spa cult meeting was an emergency worthy of waking me before 6, they were about to learn how stubborn a man can get when his peace and property are violated. No one touches my land. Not at 5 in the damn morning. Not ever. By the next morning, I had convinced myself that yesterday's insanity was just the HOA equivalent of a drunk dial. Maybe someone misread a map, or Karen had an early morning stroke of stupidity that would burn itself out once caffeine reached her bloodstream. I was wrong in the same way people are wrong right before a tornado picks up their truck. A little after 9, a delivery van rolled onto my property again. Same driver, same tight smile of a man who knows he's become a courier for lunatics. He handed me a thick, bright orange folder with mandatory community materials stamped across the front. I thanked him, mostly because he looked like he needed to see at least one sane person today, then went inside and dropped the folder on the dining table. I poured myself more coffee, strong enough to sanitize wounds, then sat down and opened the damn thing. The first page froze me mid-sip. It was a color-printed, laminated map of Timberline Falls and the surrounding parcels. Except this one showed my entire western boundary shifted inward by what looked like 20 feet. And where my sauna sat, firmly, undeniably on my land, the map had a blue icon labeled Community Bathhouse Zone. The legend included categories like Shared Steam Resource, Group Meditation Space, and my personal favorite, Collective Wellness Hub. Collective Wellness, I muttered. I'll show them Collective Wellness. The next page was worse. An official-looking notice demanding I submit a spare key for administrative safety. They also wanted me to ensure consistent heating availability during community-approved hours, which, according to the attached schedule, spanned damn near every morning and half the evenings. My jaw tightened. I set the pages aside before I shredded them with my bare hands. Instead, I picked up my phone and drove straight into town. The County Land Records office in Cheyenne is a plain brick building with a waiting room that always smells faintly of printer toner and government despair. I walked up to the counter and spoke to a clerk named Rowena, who had been there so long her personality was fused to the filing cabinet behind her. I gave her my parcel ID, told her someone was circulating altered maps claiming my boundary was different, and asked for the official, stamped copies. She typed for a minute, frowned, typed faster, then left her desk without a word. She returned with a supervisor who looked at me like I'd just reported finding treasure in my backyard instead of paperwork fraud. "Mr. Reeves," he said, "your parcel hasn't been modified since 1986. That sauna, permitted and recorded under your name. No easements, no shared rights. Whoever sent you anything else might be violating state code." I asked for multiple certified copies. He printed them, stamped them, signed them, and even called over another clerk to double notarize. When a bureaucrat double notarizes something unprompted, it means the situation is about to get stupid in a legally actionable way. I drove home with copies in the passenger seat, the way other people drive home with newborns. When I pulled into my driveway, something caught my eye. A woman standing just beyond my gate, holding up her phone and taking photos. Slow, methodical shots of the sauna, the fence, even the gravel path leading to my porch. When she noticed me, she jerked upright like a raccoon caught stealing dog food, then scurried off toward the HOA walking trail. By the time I got out of the truck, she'd vanished into the trees. I took the maps inside, laminated one myself, then marched right back to the gate and zip-tied it in a clear plastic sleeve where even a blind man could read it. Above it, I hung a sign I carved years ago for hikers who wandered too close. Private land. Trespassers will be recorded. My camera above the gate blinked a soft blue, as if nodding in agreement. That evening, as I grilled a steak and tried to reclaim a sliver of peace, my phone pinged, a mass email from HOA President Karen Shelby. Subject line, clarification regarding community bathhouse access. The email was a masterpiece of delusion. According to her, the sauna had been misclassified during a preliminary recreational zoning session and incorrectly registered as a private unit. She informed residents that the structure remains intended for community use and that my refusal to comply jeopardizes neighborhood harmony. I scrolled farther and nearly choked on my beer. Attached was a graphic, clearly made in some free online map editor, showing my land chopped up like a pizza slice, with the sauna section colored teal and labeled Bathhouse Hub. The HOA logo hovered above it, like the stamp of a dictatorship. As I sat there staring at the idiocy on my screen, another email arrived, this one from a neighbor inside Timberline Falls, a friendly man I'd spoken to exactly twice. He wrote, "Heads up, HOA is telling everyone you agreed to community access when you bought the land. They're circulating a narrative that the sauna was built for the neighborhood, but you locked it up. None of us saw any proof, though." I replied with the certified maps and thanked him. By the time the sun set, my patience had evaporated completely. I wasn't just annoyed anymore. I was assessing potential damage paths, reviewing contingencies, planning next moves the way I used to plan entry warrants and transport routes. I checked the sauna gate before going inside. Locked tight, fence intact, cameras armed. The land was quiet. But I'd been around long enough to know that quiet from crazy people isn't peace. It's planning. I woke up the next day with a strange sense of calm, the same kind I used to feel right before a raid back in my marshal days. Not fear, not tension. Just the quiet, steady awareness that someone somewhere was about to make a very stupid decision, and I would be forced to respond in a way they wouldn't enjoy. I brewed coffee, stepped onto the porch, and scanned the tree line. Everything looked normal. The birds didn't know they lived next to lunatics. Before leaving for Cheyenne, I checked the sauna fence out of habit. The lock panel blinked green, armed, secure. The wooden beams were solid, no signs of tampering. I almost let myself believe that maybe, the HOA had realized messing with a former federal marshal wasn't the wisest life choice. I fed the fictional version of that thought to the trash and headed out. The job in Cheyenne took most of the day. By noon, I was reviewing safety procedures for a logistics firm, sipping bad coffee, and thinking more about the ridgeline of my property than their evacuation plan. Still, it kept my mind occupied until my phone buzzed in my pocket with a notification I had hoped I'd never see. Motion detected. Rear perimeter. The footage popped up immediately. It showed shadows moving along the back of my fence, shapes too coordinated, too clustered to be wildlife. I watched the camera angle switch automatically as the system tracked movement. 6 people, robes, towels draped over shoulders, 2 men, 4 women, and one of them, short gray hair, arrogant posture, looked uncomfortably familiar even on a grainy feed. Karen. They walked along the fence line like they were inspecting a trail. Then one of the men dragged a stepladder from behind a pine tree. A stepladder. They'd stashed tools behind my property like burglars or teenagers sneaking into a swimming pool. I clenched my jaw. The footage continued. The group pushed the ladder against the fence and 2 of them climbed up. I muttered, "Don't do it," even though the video obviously couldn't hear me. They did it. One by one, they climbed over my fence like they owned the forest, my land, and gravity itself. Inside the perimeter, one of the men reached into a duffel bag and pulled out something that made my blood pressure spike. A handheld universal magnetic override tool, the kind used by electricians, property managers, and occasionally criminals with ambition. He pressed it to the electronic lock on the sauna door. Nothing. He tried again. Still nothing. Then he opened the duffel bag wider and took out something worse. A portable latch bypass device, black housing, LED indicators, the exact model I'd seen used once during evidence seizure, a tool not sold to the public. Someone in that HOA either bought it illegally or had a friend with a badge and no integrity. He hooked it to the panel. This time, the door clicked. They cheered. My sauna door swung open and the group slipped inside. Within minutes, I saw steam rolling out of the upper window vent, far thicker than anything the system usually produced that quickly. My sensors flashed a warning. Internal heat, rising abnormally. I called 911 before the system could escalate to auto shutdown. "This is Reeves," I said. "Private property trespass. 6 individuals forced entry into my sauna. They're overheating the system. I need deputies out there now." The dispatcher asked for details. I gave them coordinates, structure type, perimeter layout, everything drilled into me from years of writing reports. She confirmed a unit was already nearby and would be on scene quickly. I hung up and rewound the footage while I waited. The intruders were lighting candles, spreading towels, placing bowls of herbs on the benches, like they were performing some woodland exorcism. At one point, one woman waved what looked like a bundle of sage, nearly hitting the thermostat. The system alarms grew louder on my phone. High CO2, risk of ventilation damage, fire hazard if heat kept climbing. The next alert chimed in. Door forced open, integrity compromised. A deputy arrived first. On camera, he tried the fence gate. It was locked. Then I saw him look up, noticed the ladder still leaning against the outside. He radioed for backup before climbing over. Inside the perimeter, he knocked on the sauna door. Steam billowed out as one of the HOA members cracked it open. A woman's voice yelled something like, "We're in the middle of a cleansing." The deputy shouted back, "Ma'am, this is private property. Exit the structure immediately." I watched the standoff from Cheyenne like it was some deranged wildlife documentary. The group argued with him. They waved papers, probably their stupid fake map. Then, predictably, Karen arrived, marching into the camera frame with the confidence of someone who has never been told no in her entire life. She began lecturing the deputy, pointing at my fence, at the sauna, waving her hands like she was conducting an orchestra of delusion. I couldn't hear her, but I recognized the body language. The entitled conviction of a woman who believes the universe runs on her permission. A second patrol unit showed up. This one included a sergeant, broad, calm, older, the kind of man who could settle a riot with a single eyebrow. He spoke to the deputy, then to the group. Then he motioned them out of the sauna one by one. When I saw them exit, wrapped in robes and dripping like a cult caught in the middle of a baptism, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The footage ended with the sergeant securing the structure and escorting everyone outside the fence. No arrests, no handcuffs, just removal and documentation. I was already in my truck and halfway out of Cheyenne by the time the last intruder stepped off my land. When I finally pulled into my driveway at sunset, the damage was clear. The door frame had been bent from the bypass tool. The interior humidity sensors had shorted. The emergency vent had triggered and was stuck open. I did a quick estimate in my head, close to $5,000, maybe a little over. I ran my hand along the broken edge of the lock and felt heat still radiating from the steel. My property had been violated, my equipment damaged, and HOA members had been emboldened enough to treat my land like a day spa. I didn't shout, I didn't curse, I didn't panic. I walked back to the house, pulled up the sheriff's online incident form, and submitted a full criminal complaint. If Karen wanted a war, she'd finally gotten one. The next morning, the valley looked exactly the same. Same mist on the lake, same pale light on the tree line, same quiet. The difference was in my head. Yesterday, the HOA had crossed from annoying to criminal. Today, I wanted to see how far they were willing to double down on being stupid in writing. I didn't have to wait long. Around 10, I heard gravel crunch in the driveway. Not a cruiser, no authoritative rumble, no radios. Just a compact sedan rolling up as if it were delivering takeout. A kid in a polo shirt climbed out holding a stiff white envelope with Timberline Falls letterhead stamped in smug navy blue. "Delivery for Mr. Reeves," he said. No eye contact, no small talk, just the tone of someone who'd already decided I was the villain in a story he only knew one side of. I took the envelope and signed, mostly to confirm chain of stupid. When he left, I opened it right there on the porch. The header read, Community Impact Assessment and Cooperation Invoice. Below that was a neat list of charges. Disruption of scheduled cleansing session. Failure to provide access to shared wellness facility. Emotional distress caused to participating residents. The total at the bottom, $6,200. They'd actually itemized their hurt feelings. I let out a slow breath and set the papers down on the railing so the morning breeze could think about carrying them away. Instead, I snapped a photo, scanned them into my system, and filed them under a new folder I named Evidence Idiots. My phone buzzed almost immediately after. Email from the HOA with the same document attached as a PDF, plus a note. Failure to remit payment within 30 days may result in legal action. Good. I hoped they wasted money filing it. By noon, the second front opened. This time, the sender wasn't the HOA. It was the county commission's office. Subject line, Notice of Hearing, Recreational Access, and Zoning Clarification. The body of the email was pure bureaucratic neutrality. It acknowledged a formal complaint filed by Timberline Falls HOA alleging that I had restricted access to pre-designated community recreational infrastructure and scheduled a public hearing to discuss land use expectations and neighborhood harmony. They'd actually dragged the county into this. On paper, it looked like I was the one being investigated. I called the number at the bottom and got a clerk who sounded like he'd rather be anywhere else. I gave him my parcel number, my name, and asked why in hell there was a zoning clarification, hearing about property that hadn't changed since Reagan. He sighed. Sir, when we receive a certain number of complaints from a recognized association, we have to schedule a hearing. It doesn't mean you're in the wrong, it just means there's enough noise. How many complaints? I asked. He clicked his mouse. Over 100 signed statements from Timberline Falls residents, all claiming they were told this sauna was built as a community facility. I wasn't surprised. I was pissed, but not surprised. Fine, I said. I'll be there, and I'll be bringing the real maps. After the call, I stared out at the lake for a moment, counting backward from 10, then from 20. Anger is a tool. You either use it or it uses you. I'd seen too many good people let it blind them. I wasn't going to be one of them. The universe, apparently, didn't think I was sufficiently entertained yet. That evening, as I was checking the perimeter, I found another envelope in my mailbox. This one unmarked, plain white, with my name scrawled in block letters. No logo, no stamps, just paper and tension. I opened it on the spot. Inside was a photocopied page from some internal HOA document, highlighted in yellow. Under the header, Strategic Plan, Bathhouse Integration were bullet points that made my fingers curl. Coordinate with surveyor to propose boundary adjustment on recreational overlay map. Present sauna as historically intended shared amenity, frame owner as obstructive. If necessary, pursue legal declaration of abandonment and facilitate acquisition by third-party entity, Timberline Wellness Partners LLC, for $1. $1. I felt something cold and familiar slide into place inside my chest. It was the same feeling I used to get when a target's file stopped being abstract and became flesh and blood predation. At the bottom of the page, a handwritten note. You didn't get this from me. They're lying to all of us. A concerned neighbor. I went back to the house, scanned the document, then turned to my laptop and started digging. It took me less than 30 minutes to find Timberline Wellness Partners LLC in the state's business registry. Registered 3 months ago. Listed address, a P.O. box in town. Registered agent, a law firm that specialized in property optimization. Principal contact, Karen Shelby. She hadn't just decided my sauna was communal out of principle. She'd marked it for acquisition. Cheap. I forwarded everything to my attorney with a short message. We're done playing defense. Within an hour, she called me. Nolan, she said, what you just sent me is not only unethical, it's bordering on textbook racketeering. They're fabricating a public narrative to justify a private transfer of value. We're taking this to the prosecutor. Good, I said. And the county hearing? You'll go, she replied, but not as some citizen on trial. You'll go as the property owner who's about to drop documentation that makes the HOA look like an organized scam. In the meantime, I'm filing notice with the sheriff and the district attorney. You're not dealing with a nosy board anymore. You're dealing with a conspiracy to defraud. For the rest of the night, I assembled a neat stack. Certified parcel maps, permit approvals, incident reports from the sheriff, photos of the damage to the sauna, copies of the bogus invoice, and the internal HOA strategy page. I slipped everything into a hard case like I was prepping evidence for court, because that's exactly what I was doing. Timberline Falls thought they were playing neighborhood politics. They'd just stepped onto federal-grade ground. By sunrise the next day, I had already been awake for an hour, not because of anxiety. No, I'd slept just fine, knowing the HOA had finally crossed a line clean enough to make prosecutors salivate. I got up early because old habits from the Marshal Service die hard. When trouble is gathering, you don't wait for it to knock. You meet it halfway. I brewed my coffee, walked through the house, and double-checked the evidence case sitting on my kitchen table. Every document was in order, every recording labeled, every screenshot printed and dated. It was the kind of preparation that made attorneys breathe easier and criminals sweat through their shirts. Before I could even finish my mug, my phone buzzed again, this time with a call from my attorney. Morning, Nolan, she said. Just spoke with the sheriff. They're escalating the intrusion report. The district attorney wants your materials delivered today. Good, I said, pulling on my jacket. "I'll be there in an hour." She hesitated. "And, Nolan, the HOA president might not realize how serious this is. Don't be surprised if she escalates publicly." "That's fine," I replied. "She's been escalating privately for days." On my way out, I stopped by the sauna to photograph the damage in daylight. The bypass tool had chewed the metal around the latch like a wild animal. The vent was still jammed open, the interior warped slightly from the heat surge. The smell of burned cedar lingered in the air like an insult. I added the new photos to the evidence folder and headed out. The drive to the sheriff's office was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like the world is inhaling before something big. When I arrived, the sergeant who had responded to the sauna incident met me in the lobby. He looked tired, but when he saw the stack of stamped parcel maps under my arm, something like vindication settled on his face. "Glad you brought the paperwork," he said. "We've been getting calls from the HOA non-stop, all saying you attacked their ceremony." I raised an eyebrow. "They trespassed, forced entry, and damaged my property. How exactly does that turn into me attacking them?" He sighed. "You'd be shocked how many people believe the first version they hear. That's why we need your evidence in full." He escorted me to a small office where an investigator waited. I handed over the hard case and began walking them through the timeline. The 5:46 a.m. call, the gate intrusion, the ladder, the bypass device, the overheated sauna, the fake maps, the bogus invoices, and the plan to seize my land for $1. The investigator kept nodding, scribbling notes faster with each detail. By the time I finished, the sergeant whistled under his breath. "That LLC connection to Shelby? That alone is enough for the DA to open a fraud review." "Good," I said, "because they're not just delusional, they're organized." The investigator looked up. "We're forwarding everything to the prosecutor today. They'll likely request interviews with the HOA board. You may get called in as well. Whenever they need me," I said. On the way out of the office, I glanced at the lobby TV. Local news was playing, muted, but the headline across the bottom of the screen wasn't subtle. "Lake property dispute heats up. HOA claims community bathhouse rights." Of course, they'd gone to the media. I read the scrolling text as I stood there. "Homeowners claim long-standing agreement. Structure allegedly built for shared wellness. Owner refuses access. Sparks community outrage." My jaw tightened. They were painting me as some selfish hermit hoarding a luxury amenity. I'd expected pushback, but not a propaganda campaign before breakfast. I stepped outside, pulled out my phone, and opened the footage from the intrusion. I clipped a segment showing the ladder propped against my fence, the bypass device attached to the lock, the system alarm flashing red, the deputy ordering everyone out, and Karen waving fake documents like a cult leader mid-sermon. I uploaded it to the local Facebook community group with a simple caption: "Since the HOA is speaking publicly, here's what actually happened on my private land. Footage from security cameras time-stamped." I hit post. It took about 10 minutes before the notifications exploded. Shares, comments, eye reactions, angry reactions, messages from neighbors I didn't know, messages from people outside Wyoming who didn't even know what a sauna looked like. And then Reddit found it. Someone reposted the video to a Wyoming subreddit with the title, "HOA breaks into private sauna at sunrise. Owner catches them on camera." Within half an hour, the post hit the top 3. People started tagging news outlets. A few asked if they could interview me. One suggested selling the movie rights. By the time I got home, my inbox looked like a war zone. Journalists, residents apologizing for being misled, old friends sending popcorn emojis. But the cherry on top came at 4:30 in the afternoon, when Karen herself finally broke her public silence with a Facebook post that read like a fever dream. "This video is out of context. Our actions were sanctioned by decades of unspoken community tradition. We are being persecuted for pursuing spiritual wellness. The owner is weaponizing technology to distort the narrative. Unspoken community tradition, weaponizing technology, persecution." They'd gone full cult. Within minutes, her post was flooded with comments calling her insane, dangerous, delusional, or all three. Some residents demanded her resignation. Others threatened to sue her personally for misleading them. I watched it all unfold from my porch, sipping a fresh mug of coffee as the sun dipped behind the ridge. The land was quiet again. My cameras blinked steadily. The lake shimmered in the fading light. The war had officially moved into the public square, and the HOA was bleeding. By the time the weekend rolled around, Timberline Falls looked less like a scenic mountain community and more like a political battleground. Every driveway had someone arguing on a phone. Every porch had residents whispering and pointing. The HOA board, once smug and untouchable, now looked like a herd of meerkats surrounded by hawks. Early Saturday morning, I got a call from the sheriff's office. The investigator's voice was calm but firm. Mr. Reeves, the prosecutor, has initiated a formal review of HOA operations. We're executing several information requests today. You may notice activity. Activity was an understatement. By 10 a.m., 2 unmarked county vehicles rolled into Timberline Falls. Deputies headed straight to the HOA office, a cabin the association proudly called their administrative lodge, which had always struck me as a pretentious name for a shed with Wi-Fi. I stood at the edge of my property, coffee in hand, watching as officers carried out boxes of financial documents and computer towers. From across the road, I saw HOA residents gathering like people watching a tornado from their porch, half horrified, half vindicated. And right in the center was Karen, face stiff, arms folded, talking to a deputy with the kind of brittle confidence people use right before they fall apart. Not an hour later, another spectacle unfolded. 3 board members, including the vice president, resigned publicly on the HOA Facebook page. Their statements were dramatic, claims that they had no knowledge of fraudulent actions, that they trusted leadership in good faith. One even apologized to me directly. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed with a text from the investigator. Financial irregularities discovered. HOA funds may have been diverted. I stared at the message, exhaled, and looked back at the administrative lodge. I had suspected incompetence. I hadn't expected corruption. By afternoon, residents began approaching my gate, not to demand access, but to apologize. One older couple brought a pie. Another brought a basket of firewood. A teenager from the neighborhood said, "My mom told me we're never voting for Mrs. Shelby again." I thanked them politely, but kept my guard up. Apologies were nice, but the HOA wasn't finished yet. Not as long as Karen was still standing. Around 4, I received an email from the temporary county-appointed HOA administrator, a neutral party inserted while the investigation proceeded. The message confirmed what the street chatter had already suggested. Timberline Falls HOA had violated state property statutes, misused association funds, and falsified internal documents. They were officially under state supervision until further notice. The last line of the email read, "Please be advised that President Shelby is no longer authorized to speak on behalf of the association." Funny, considering she had already made 3 more Facebook posts that afternoon claiming she was the victim of a deep state land conspiracy. According to her, I was working with county officials to dismantle a spiritual community. She also called my sauna a symbolic site of resistance. If she kept it up, I expected her next post to include a GoFundMe link for liberation steam rituals. But the real breaking point came just before sunset. A deputy stopped by my gate to let me know the prosecutor had upgraded the case. Karen was now officially under criminal investigation for document falsification and attempted fraudulent acquisition of private land. The deputy made it clear that charges were likely and soon. Behind him, the HOA was in shambles. Meetings canceled, members turning on each other, the so-called sanctified wellness program quietly scrubbed from their website. As the deputy left, I looked at my sauna, still scarred from their intrusion but standing firm, and then at the fading Timberline Falls community beyond my fence. The storm wasn't over, but the winds had shifted. For the first time since this circus began, Karen wasn't attacking. She was cornered. The hearing felt less like a county proceeding and more like a public autopsy. The room was packed. Residents, reporters, attorneys, and a handful of people who clearly came just for entertainment. I walked in with my evidence case, nodded to my attorney, and took a seat near the front. Across the aisle sat Karen, looking like a politician who'd been caught burying money in her backyard. Stiff smile, pale face, eyes flicking around as if searching for a lifeline. The county commissioner opened the session with the usual procedural language, but the moment he said, "We will begin with testimony from Mr. Reeves," the room snapped into focus. I stepped up, placed my documents on the podium, and laid out the truth in clean, professional order. Parcel boundaries, certified maps, permit records, the video of the fence breach, the damage to my sauna, and the internal HOA strategy page planning the fraudulent takeover. Each item hit the room like a hammer. Even the stenographer looked up twice. Karen's turn came next. She marched to the front, clutching a stack of papers thick enough to choke a wood chipper. When she spoke, her voice trembled, not with fear, but with unhinged certainty. "This sauna," she said, "has always been a spiritual cornerstone of our community. The owner's maps are outdated. Our association's vision establishes communal harmony through shared facilities." The commissioner cut her off. "Ma'am, your association has no authority over land not legally under its jurisdiction." Karen blinked as if she'd never heard the word jurisdiction before. My attorney presented the LLC registration tying Karen directly to the suspicious Timberline Wellness Partners. When the prosecutor's representative stepped forward to confirm that the HOA funds had been redirected into accounts linked to the same LLC, the room went dead quiet. A single cough echoed like a firecracker. Then the commissioner dropped the final blow. "President Shelby, due to the evidence presented, the county recognizes probable cause for multiple violations, including document falsification and attempted fraudulent acquisition of private property. You are hereby removed from your position pending criminal review." Karen's face crumpled in slow motion. She tried to argue, but when two deputies entered the room at the prosecutor's signal, her voice collapsed into a hoarse whisper. They approached calmly, professionally, but the moment one touched her elbow, she snapped. "This is political sabotage. It's a wellness site. It was meant for all of us." Her shout rang off the chamber walls. Cameras flashed, residents flinched, and, just like that, Karen Shelby, self-proclaimed guardian of community harmony, was escorted out in handcuffs. The rest of the hearing proceeded like an afterthought. The HOA was ordered to compensate me for damages. The fraudulent map was formally invalidated, and the county recognized my sauna as protected private property. When we finally stepped outside, reporters swarmed, but I kept walking. I didn't need headlines. I needed air, sunlight, and the quiet certainty that justice had finally turned the tables. Behind me, the HOA building sat dark, door locked, leadership gone. Timberline Falls looked stunned but relieved, like a town that had just survived a wildfire. The war wasn't just turning, it was ending. The morning after the hearing felt different. The air was clearer, the lake quieter, as if the whole valley had exhaled now that the source of its collective migraine was sitting in a county holding cell. I stepped onto my porch with a mug of coffee and felt, for the first time in weeks, that nothing insane was waiting to ambush me before breakfast. By mid-morning, a county vehicle rolled up my driveway. Not police, administrative. A representative stepped out with a brown envelope and an apologetic smile. "Mr. Reeves, on behalf of the County Land Commission, we want to formally close the matter." Inside the envelope were 3 documents. An official letter of apology for the HOA's misuse of county channels, certification affirming that my property boundaries and sauna were permanently recorded as private, and a protection agreement designating my land as exempt from all HOA jurisdiction and claims present or future. I signed where needed and handed the folder back. The representative thanked me for my cooperation, then added quietly, "Between you and me, the HOA fallout is going to be messy, but you handled yourself better than most." After he left, I walked down to the sauna. The repairs were nearly done. The new lock gleamed, the cedar had been replaced, the ventilation patched. The structure stood firm again, as stubborn and solid as the day I built it. I rested a hand on the door and allowed myself a small smile. The next visitor was less official, but more unexpected. A cluster of Timberline Falls residents approached my gate. Families, older couples, even the teenager who joked about never voting for Karen again. They looked embarrassed, relieved, and grateful all at once. A woman stepped forward with a basket. "We wanted to apologize," she said, "for believing her, for going along with everything. We didn't know." I nodded. "You weren't the ones climbing my fence." "You're fine." Someone else added, "We're electing a new board, people who aren't insane." "Good," I said. "Start fresh." They handed me homemade bread, jars of jam, even a bundle of firewood. It felt like an old Wyoming custom being dusted off, neighbors repairing what madness had broken. By afternoon, the county posted an official notice online. Timberline Falls HOA was under temporary state oversight, membership dues frozen, all previous action subject to review. In simple terms, they weren't allowed to touch anything, decide anything, or claim anything. And Karen, she was being held on 3 charges: document falsification, attempted fraudulent acquisition, and unlawful entry. More were under review. As the sun dipped low, I screwed in the final piece of my repaired gate, a small polished metal plaque I'd ordered the moment I knew this war was wrapping up. It read, "Private property, no access, not for Karen." It gleamed in the fading light like a promise. I lit the sauna for the first time since the break-in, the familiar warmth rising in the chamber. I settled on the bench, listening to the soft crackle of cedar and the low hum of the heater. For the first time in weeks, the heat felt earned. No more sunrise cult sessions, no more fake maps, no more pretentious cleansing ceremonies. My land was mine again, and this time, nobody would dare mistake it for anything else.